Hi, my name is Ophi YouTube Videos. I am a feminist and a lesbian, and I make conversational commentary videos about both of those things. We're talking about the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni, It Ends With Us fallout again today. I actually rang in the new year last night working on the beginning of this script. We will be talking about the smear campaign against Blake Lively, and here in the Nuance Corner, we do not believe that a victim needs to be perfect or likable to not deserve sexual harassment or retaliation for reporting that sexual harassment. I have already read Blake's complaint nearly in full. You can find that video and the whole playlist of my videos ever since August when I first started to think that this was suspicious, linked in the description below. I just want to talk about the Variety write-up. I want to talk about Blake's lawsuit. It's too much to read the whole Baldoni complaint today. Now, I have personally read the whole Baldoni complaint. I wouldn't make a video without having read the entire complaint. I just am not going to read you the entire complaint today. I did know that this lawsuit was coming, and I say know and not suspect because there was actually an exclusive statement from Brian Freedman to Page 6 where he promised that there would be some bombshell thing. And I saw that the same night that I made my week 1 updates video and published it, so I was like, whatever. I will wait until the actual bombshell happens. And I'm not convinced that this is the bombshell. Like, Brian was convinced that whatever they were putting in their lawsuit was going to shock the world, and I don't know. Let me know in the comments, I guess, if any of this is shocking to you. The Variety write-up is written by a woman named Tatiana Siegel. I will say, I think it's very intentional that they had a woman be the one to break this story. I feel like that has been a through line in a lot of the journalism around this, and I think it's a very intentional one. But like the same case with Blake, there was a man who was in that reporting, but it was also primarily being broken by women. And the article is bad, and I hate it. I want to start with just the first paragraph here and why I hate it, because I feel like that sets us a pretty good baseline to weave through. It tells us the tone for the rest of this, right? Okay, so here is the opening paragraph. On June 2nd, 2023, Blake Lively began a text exchange with her It Ends With Us director and co-star Justin Baldoni that blamed her assistant for not getting her an updated batch of script pages. She didn't realize they were new, Lively wrote. New pages can always be sent to me as well, please. The actress signed the missive with an X, the universal symbol for a kiss. Lively followed up with another text shortly thereafter. I'm just pumping in my trailer if you want to work out our lines. Baldoni responded, copy. Eating with crew and we'll head that way. 18 months later, that interaction was depicted in a New York Times bombshell report in a far more sinister light. The Times wrote, Baldoni repeatedly entered her makeup trailer uninvited while she was undressed, including when she was breastfeeding. Lots to unpack here, lots I'm already upset by. I want to zoom in on one part in particular that's kind of buried toward the middle. The actress signed the missive with an X. A universal symbol for a kiss. Okay, hi, I'm sorry. Tatiana, what the fuck is this supposed to mean? Can you explain this to me a little bit? Because I guess your editor didn't ask you to. What is the universal symbol for a kiss supposed to imply here? And why is that implication so important that it is in the opening paragraph? Because what it tells me is a very sly blink and you'll miss it / the feminist who calls this out will be called hysterical little nod at, well, maybe Blake Lively flirted with Justin Baldoni first, so everything he did was fine. Which I do think is some groundwork that they're attempting to lay for later. But more on that when we get into all of the reasons that they tried to give for it to be okay for him to comment on her or her character's sexiness. But okay, yeah, the universal symbol for a kiss and whatever it is trying to carry with it aside, what exactly is this opening paragraph attempting to convey? You'd think you put the big bombshell here, right? Like, we are explicitly trying to counter We Can Bury Anyone with this Variety article, which, like, not a really great matchup. I mean, Variety's fine, but it's like New York Times versus Variety. Clearly, we are attempting to counter the part in the New York Times write-up where Blake Lively alleged that her dressing room would be barged into when she was in various states of undress or breastfeeding. And what's the gotcha exactly? From what I'm reading here, it is trying to tell me that Blake invited Justin into her dressing room once, with plenty of time before he would get there and walk in, and that therefore there is no other time when he would have ever barged in uninvited? The text from Blake doesn't even say, "Come by anytime, you don't even need to knock, I'm not shy." It just is an invitation in one specific instance. The presence of other people in her dressing room was never the issue being made in that complaint. It was when they were there against her consent and without her invitation. But the article just plugs along as if we have all agreed that by inviting Justin into her trailer once, Blake signed away all rights to any kind of privacy in her trailer in the future. That discrepancy is one of many, highlighted in a scathing $250 million lawsuit filed Tuesday afternoon by Baldoni against the Times in Los Angeles Superior Court. Baldoni is among a group of 10 plaintiffs that also includes publicists Melissa Nathan and Jennifer Abel, who are suing the newspaper for libel and false light invasion of privacy over the December 21st article titled, "We Can Bury Anyone Inside a Hollywood Smear Machine." The parties, which also include It Ends With Us producers Jamie Heath and Steve Sarowitz, claim that the Times relied on cherry-picked and altered communications stripped of necessary content and deliberately spliced to mislead. A New York Times spokesperson responded, "The role of an independent news organization is to follow the facts where they lead. Our story was meticulously and responsibly reported. It was based on a review of thousands of pages of original documents, including the text messages and emails that we quote accurately and at length in the article. To date, Wayfarer Studios, Mr. Baldoni, the other subjects of the article, and their representatives have not pointed to a single error. We published their full statement in response to the allegations in the article as well. We plan to vigorously defend against the lawsuit." The 87-page complaint, which also accuses the Times of promissory fraud and breach of implied in fact contract, offers a rebuttal of the narrative set forth in the 4,000-word article that has rocked Hollywood and led to WME dropping Baldoni as a client hours after publication. Written by Megan Tohey, Mike McIntyre, and Julia Tate, the piece painted Lively as an actress who allegedly endured months of sexual harassment from Baldoni and Heath, and supposedly faced retaliation in the form of a smear campaign because she voiced her concerns. But according to the lawsuit, it was Lively who embarked on a strategic and manipulative smear campaign of her own and used false sexual harassment allegations to assert unilateral control over every aspect of the production. And, according to the suit, Lively's husband, actor Ryan Reynolds, allegedly berated Baldoni in an aggressive manner during a heated meeting at their Tribeca penthouse in New York, accusing him of fat-shaming his wife. The suit claims that the A-list actor also pressured Baldoni's agency, WME, to drop the director during the Deadpool and Wolverine premiere in July, well before Baldoni enlisted Crisis PR. A WME rep denies there was any pressure from Reynolds or Lively to drop Baldoni as a client, and says his former agent wasn't at that premiere. Yeah, I actually do believe that Ryan Reynolds did not get Baldoni fired by his agent, but I do think the concept of Ryan Reynolds, as is described later in this as well, yelling at him / trying to get his agent to drop him, I think that's funny. I think that's like almost enough to make me like Ryan Reynolds. I'm also not entirely positive if the heated meeting is the same one described in Blake's complaint, the one that Ryan attended that we know that Blake insisted on for her return to set protections before she came back to filming after the strike. Attorney Brian Freedman, who filed the lawsuit on behalf of the plaintiffs, tells Variety that the Times cowered to the wants and whims of two powerful, untouchable Hollywood elites, disregarding journalistic practices and ethics once befitting of the revered publication by using doctored and manipulated texts and intentionally omitting texts which dispute their chosen PR narrative. Brian Freedman is, you know how I sometimes joke that all roads lead back to Alexa Nicholas? Brian Freedman is a lawyer who I had name recognition for because of the research I did last year on Alexa Nicholas and her activism. See? Time spent learning is never truly wasted. Like pretty much all lawyers, this guy does not have a 100% bad guy rate for people he defends. For example, he represented FKA Twigs when she went up against Shia LaBeouf. But Freedman has also defended people like Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson. I'm going to go ahead and pull from a Hollywood Reporter write-up that I found flawed in like one specific way, but otherwise very interesting about this guy. Freedman, the divisive Hollywood attorney who's referred to himself as a pit bull and is known for a rabidity and ruthlessness that can make even his fellow ferocious practitioners marvel in astonishment, has ascended as a powerhouse in recent years, becoming the go-to for alpha dogs who see themselves as the underdogs in a crisis. Freedman's also been behind Gabrielle Union's toxic workplace claim with America's Got Talent, Jamie Lynn Spears in her war of words with sister Britney, and defended Diplo when the musician was accused of distributing revenge porn. Half of what I'm going to read to you is interesting it's just interesting that this is the guy who is defending Baldoni. It's interesting that this is the guy who's defending Baldoni and filing this new lawsuit. It's interesting to know that this is how other people think about the kind of lawsuits that this guy files, his reputation and all of that. The Wolf of Wall Street inspiration Jordan Belfort, who hired Freedman to sue the movie's producers for purported fraud, says that Freedman's theatrics serve him well. The reputation makes people think twice, explains Belfort, whose suit was settled. It's a big thing emotionally to people on the other side. They take it seriously. Yet one seasoned litigator, who's had a history of dealings opposite Freedman, believes that the bark can belie a lack of bite. He knows how to create hype, which instills fear in the other party, but there's not a lot of substance, taking what, when you look into it, are small grievances and turning them into something untrue, says this lawyer. The business plan is about setting out narratives that are perceived as difficult by studios and production companies that don't want negative press in order to secure settlements. Entertainment attorneys like Freedman almost always prefer to resolve conflicts through arbitration or mediation. Yet some critics point to the fact that he has scant record of victory in the most transparent and unforgiving forum, civil court, as proof that the core of his advocacy claims don't often hold up. Brian Freedman isn't considered a trial lawyer by my peers, says another lawyer. In my experience with him, he is all hyperbole and no substance. We don't take him seriously. But the other half of it is interesting in terms of Brian Freedman being a piece of shit, / also, the Eat Predators tie-in here. Freedman shrugs off the notion that he makes untoward use of what he refers to as the media strategy, at least compared to his peers. He insists that many cases never publicly surface because they're successfully negotiated before that phase is reached. Freedman himself has learned what it's like to be on the business end of the media strategy. In 2022, former Nickelodeon actress and #MeToo activist. What? Alexa Nicholas publicized court records of a sexual assault case that Freedman had settled for $40,000 without admitting liability 3 decades earlier. He was representing Nicholas's ex-husband in then ongoing litigation over abuse claims. The documentation, reviewed by The Hollywood Reporter, details how the plaintiff, who first sued in 1986, became drunk at a UC Berkeley party and met undergraduate Freedman and his frat brothers, who led her to their fraternity house where she alleged they sexually assaulted her in rapid succession. You should read this whole thing if you want. There is one portion that felt very disbelieving of victims to me that I did not like, but other than that, I thought the article itself was really interesting. I am skipping forward just a little bit and lightly paraphrasing to take us out of the woods on this portion. After Nicholas resurfaced Freedman's settlement, her activist group Eat Predators protested in front of his Century City office tower. Later, in 2022, press outlets including Rolling Stone and Business Insider detailed the case, highlighting the attorney's high-profile work on both sides of the #MeToo movement, from Kevin Spacey to FKA Twigs. For his part, Freedman remained mum. The Hollywood Reporter asked Freedman what effect, if any, he believes the accusation and settlement have had on his career and work. He declined to address them. In a statement, he said, "It has been reported that the matter was settled without any admission of liability on anyone's part. It feels highly insensitive for any response to be used as a sword or a shield." In a filing in another recent case described in the article, Freedman's side argued that no one agrees to pay $10 million when they have done nothing wrong. Questioned why, by the same logic, his 1991 settlement payment of $40,000 was not also a tacit admonition of his own culpability, Freedman writes The Hollywood Reporter, "I have consistently denied liability, and his own payout was covered by my parents' homeowner's insurance company for a relatively nominal sum, which the carrier believed was substantially less than the likely cost of litigation." Things I don't know about. One, I don't know how this victim felt about Alexa publicizing these documents. I'm not sure if this was done with or against her consent. Two, I don't know enough about anything to know whether or not homeowners insurance really pays that kind of settlement out. I don't know. But all of this is why, despite the fact that FKA Twigs does speak very highly of him, and that I don't want to undermine the fact that she seems to have gotten a lot of comfort and also help from this guy, I think Brian Freedman is a piece of shit. I feel like he's hiding behind a legitimate victim, probably lots of legitimate victims, while also propping up abusers and being an abuser himself. It would appear there's just a lot of really vastly different clients represented by this guy. And I don't feel bad assuming that Baldoni falls closer to the Kevin Spacey end of the spectrum than the legitimate victim end. But now I do want to move back into that Variety write-up, so thank you for staying with me through the lawyer digression. The Times is reporting that Nathan and Abel planted negative stories about Lively with the press was bolstered by one particular text exchange in which the two appear to take a victory lap following a Daily Mail story about Lively that slammed her tone-deaf promotion of the film about domestic violence and resurfaced embarrassing interviews from her past. "You really outdid yourself with this piece," Abel wrote, prompting Nathan to reply, "That's why you hired me, right? I'm the best." But in its full context, it appears as though Nathan and Abel are jokingly taking credit for a story that emerged organically. The Times story omits a Nathan text that preceded the exchange, in which she said she was uninvolved in the story's publication. "Damn, this is unfair because it's also not me," she wrote. The Times also clipped Abel's use of the upside-down smiley face emoji, which is typically used to convey sarcasm. The Times story relied almost entirely on Lively's unverified and self-serving narrative, lifting it nearly verbatim while disregarding an abundance of evidence that contradicted her claims and exposed her true motives, the suit says. Alright, this missing context around this text message thing is probably the only thing I found even halfway compelling in either the article or in Justin's legal filing. The "that's why you hired me, right? I'm the best" I will allow. That text appears to be presented out of context. But we also had lots of messages that they didn't and couldn't defend about how they were, aware that there was certain stuff they couldn't put in writing. And also, nearly all of the rest of those damning text messages are not addressed. Pretty much only the "this is why you hired me, right? I'm the best," which did apparently happen to not be by Jen. But, if they had context for that one, where's the context for example, he wants to feel like she can be buried, or, we can bury anyone, or we can't write it down to him what we will do to her? What are you gonna give me around that to make that look like misrepresented sarcasm? Because I'm not quite there with them yet on that one. What about when he went window shopping for other hated female celebrities? What is the missing context from Justin texting a hate post about Hailey Bieber and saying, "We would need something like this"? How was that a feminist act of him? How was that him being the victim? Is there any explanation that preserves his feminist credibility? Because they didn't bother putting it in this filing. So yeah. Much like with the Kirsty Flaw thing, yeah, they had an answer for not having specifically planted this one in particular. But it's not even an answer I'm sure I really buy, because I wasn't offered more context for the whole Jed Wallace and "we're crushing it on Reddit" thing, and if crushing it on Reddit had something to do with seeding and boosting and astroturfing the sort of posts that were mentioned in that Daily Mail write-up, how were they not responsible for that? I still think "that's why you hired me, right? I'm the best" is bragging about how successfully they managed to implant their own chosen narrative and decisions into the minds of so many other people. And I kind of think that if you don't think that, you're letting them pick your new opinion for you too. Returning to the article here. Lively's side of the story was laid out in an 80-page letter filed December 20th with the California Civil Rights Department, which the Times used as the bedrock for its story. Unlike a lawsuit, California's Civil Rights Department complaints typically remain confidential unless they are leaked. In its previous reporting on the subject, Variety was unable to confirm that Lively even filed a letter, with the department declining to comment on the case. Notably, Lively chose not to file a lawsuit against Baldoni, Wayfarer, or any of the plaintiffs, a choice that spared her from the scrutiny of the discovery process, including answering questions under oath and producing her communications. This decision was no accident, the complaint says. That's apparently no longer true, as just after the publication of this story, Lively's attorneys said they had filed a federal complaint against Wayfarer Studios, Baldoni et al. In the Southern District of New York. Unfortunately, Ms. Lively's decision to speak out has resulted in further retaliation and attacks. As alleged in Ms. Lively's federal complaint, Wayfarer and its associates have violated federal and California state law by retaliating against her for reporting sexual harassment and workplace safety concerns. Now the defendants will answer for their conduct in a federal court, read a statement from her legal team. Oh, it makes me mad. It makes me mad that they're trying to frame it as like a shady and suspicious thing for Blake to have filed her complaint with the Civil Rights Department and not gone right to suing. I'm not saying it wasn't smart and beneficial and probably calculated for her to do it that way. But like filing the complaint the way that she did, starting with that rather than a lawsuit, managed to, for a moment, at least until Baldoni and his lawyer and everybody came in and started doing their spin and got it back about people's reputations and narratives and stuff, it centered Blake's workplace harassment complaint as a labor issue, which was smart and how they should frame it. Imagine Baldoni and Freedman are to make this about reputations and likability, but this began as a labor issue, and we should try really hard to make sure that it stays one. It's a labor issue, it's a feminism issue, it's a critical thinking and media literacy issue. This was workplace harassment, and all of this, including this lawsuit and whichever other ones they are promising to file, is retaliation. I'm pretty sure if you're watching, this is like my 4th video about It Ends With Us, I'm pretty sure if you're watching this deep into my videos about this that we already agree about that. Back into this Variety write-up. The plaintiffs also contend that the Times reporters overlooked text messages indicating that Lively's camp may have been waging its own PR war against Baldoni preemptively. The Times article also deliberately ignores that Lively's publicist, Leslie Sloan of Vision PR, once backed by Harvey Weinstein, seeded stories critical of Baldoni, including that Baldoni was a sexual predator ahead of the film's release. The complaint also states that Nathan's firm was made aware of Sloan planting an unfavorable, false, and defamatory story about Baldoni's bi-high faith to page 6, and also planted a false story alleging there were multiple HR complaints during production. Let's think about what complaints Blake's team would have had to leak about what the set of It Ends With Us was like. I'm not sure what the story about his religion would have been. I do think it's possible that maybe ties into the whole saging and speaking to the dead father things from the complaint, but we'll never know. But other than that, not only do I think that Blake's team would have had the right to leak and sort of whistleblow on HR allegations if they wanted to, I also think they didn't. I think if Blake Lively's team wanted us to know before the movie came out and when the movie was freshly out that there had been all of this tension and a big fight meeting to return to set with protections, I think we would have known about that. I think people would have had more familiarity with the idea of anything other than he said he didn't want to hurt his poor little baby back. You really don't think we would have heard more details about those supposed HR violations before December when the filing happened if they were trying to seed it? Do you really think even once Justin Baldoni had control of the narrative that TMZ would not have run with what Blake Lively's team could have fed to them? So the article has a little bit more defense that Melissa and Jennifer were just doing their jobs and just preparing for the worst case scenarios based on what they thought Blake and Ryan were gonna do, blah, blah, blah. We don't get more specifics to try to make any of the other text messages look better, though. I think because only the "this is what you hired me for" one had like a good explanation for it. But in terms of Baldoni's baloney defenses here, here's the next specific one we get into, and it's a delightful little, rake step of an attempt to debunk the birth video story from Blake's complaint. Another allegation made by Lively centered on Heath showing her a video of his naked wife. The Times compounded its journalistic failures by uncritically advancing Lively's unsubstantiated claims of sexual harassment against Heath and Baldoni, with the CRD complaint even labeling that footage as pornography. This claim is patently absurd, the lawsuit says. The video in question was a non-pornographic recording of Heath's wife during a home birth, a deeply personal one with no sexual overtone. To distort this benign event into an act of sexual misconduct is outrageous and emblematic of the lengths to which Lively and her collaborators are willing to go to defame plaintiffs. The suit adds that the video in question was shown to Lively as part of a creative discussion regarding a birthing scene in It Ends With Us. You caught it, right? They confirmed it. They confirmed that Jamie Heath showed Blake Lively a video of his wife giving birth on the set of It Ends With Us. There's also a still from that video in the complaint, just because they really want to prove to us that he's fucking weird as hell about that shit. Oh my god. And they also lie. Blake did not describe the video itself as being pornographic. She said she thought it was porn when she was first shown it. Which I think is not a totally unreasonable assumption when you are seeing like a dark, grainy video of a woman who is naked in a tub of water. And also, speaking of the tub of water, it was a water birth. I unfortunately watched It Ends With Us. It's not a water birth in the movie. She gives birth in a hospital. So even if Blake Lively somehow needed a reference, which I don't think she would, she's given birth 4 times. I think she knows what she's trying to act out. The water birth wouldn't have been helpful for her. She wasn't giving birth in water in the movie. These guys are freaks, and I'm really, really interested to see what else is going to come out in Discovery if they're willing to own up to their own freakhood, even in their own legal complaints. I believed that he showed her the birth video, but like they really just confirmed that he did and that he doesn't understand why that's an issue. Don't show your employees videos of people giving birth at work. Not even if they need to act out giving birth. Like there's never a good enough reason to show your employee a video of somebody giving birth at work, unless you're like a doula or something. But even then, probably like, do it in a classroom. Another thing that they think that they're debunking, I guess, and this one really also just drives me up the wall, because what do you mean? What the fuck do you mean? What the fuck do you mean that you don't understand that there's a difference between her referring to her own character as sexy and the director calling her sexy? What? They don't respect my intelligence. They do not respect my intelligence. They think that we're fucking stupid. And the worst thing is that I guess some people are. I think a lot of people are going to make videos where they say, oh look, Blake was lying all along and Justin Baldoni is the real victim and here's why. But this is so clearly full of shit. This is obviously fucking bullshit. There is so obviously a difference between a woman referring to a choice for clothing that she will wear in character as being sexier than something else, and your director being like, oh, take off your coat so you look more sexy. I want to see your onesie underneath. Go fuck yourself, Justin Baldoni. Go fuck yourself. Clearly, I'm getting worked up. I'm going to take a break. The Times article states that before shooting on It Ends With Us began in 2023, Lively objected to sex scenes Baldoni wanted to add that she considered gratuitous. In response, Baldoni's Wayfarer Studios agreed to provide a full-time intimacy coordinator. But today's lawsuit offers an alternate version of events. In one text message sent by Lively before production included in the suit, she indicates that she is in no hurry to meet with the film's intimacy coordinator. I feel good. I can meet her when we start. Smiley face. Thank you, though. I said I would calm down. I'm trying to be calmer. I don't see anything in this text that indicates that she did not want the intimacy coordinator present and that she herself did not want to meet the intimacy coordinator and have her present while she filmed. It seems like she said, yeah, I'll meet her when we start, and then Justin Baldoni went on to go have one-on-one meetings with the intimacy coordinator, but then rehearse intimate scenes with Blake without the intimacy coordinator present. Which to me, okay, I mean, first of all, I've always said I think there are fair criticisms to make of Blake Lively, and while I will say she did have like a 4-month-old baby, so I can see just being like, hey, I don't want to add this other thing. I'd rather just meet her once it's relevant for me to meet her. Whatever. But also, Justin was the director, the producer, owned the rights, etc., etc., etc. And I feel like it was a misunderstanding on his part what an intimacy coordinator is for. I feel like if he thought that he can just go speak to an intimacy coordinator, get all of the information that's required, and then go and direct Blake, did he think that the intimacy coordinator's purpose is to make the sex scenes sexier? Did he just assume that he was always going to outweigh the intimacy coordinator in terms of, like, superiority on set, so that's why he just would rather talk to her, and then since he's going to be directing the sex scenes anyway? In no way does I feel good, I can meet her when we start imply that Blake did not want the intimacy coordinator there, or that Blake was comfortable with Baldoni improvising kissing. So again, we're just seeing a bunch of shit that's attempting to prove a negative, and it's not proving anything. But let me continue. Baldoni's lawsuit also references notes from the intimacy coordinator that included a suggestion that perhaps Ryle, played by Baldoni, chooses not to orgasm after he satisfied Lily, played by Lively. According to the complaint, Lively personalizes this and states, "I'd be mortified if that happened to me," to which Baldoni, following Lively's lead in what seemed like an attempt to connect and to develop their characters, says, "I'm not sure about you, but those have been some of the most beautiful moments with my wife and I." I don't understand why I need to know so much about how often this man thinks his wife is having orgasms. I also do think that it's a fully different thing between Blake, like, we could assume the interest of, like, oh, a woman watching that might think it's embarrassing that he didn't want to finish with her. Because, Justin was running his mouth all the time about how obsessed he was with the female gaze and how this was for the female gaze. Maybe she was trying to help him with the female gaze. Either way, I do think that there's a difference. I think he made it far more intimate by being like, here are specifics about me and my wife and the intercourse we have, where she definitely finishes every time at the same time as me. Also, I don't know if this is him correcting that story about them simultaneously climaxing. I don't know if it's him saying this happened and then made him later telling them that they simultaneously climax and asking if Blake and Ryan do the same, that's okay. Because Blake once said that she would be embarrassed if somebody decided not to orgasm after having sex with her. And also, I don't think that's like a great take on Blake's part, but it's not the most of my concerns here. Like, the orgasm doesn't have to be the end goal for sex. I don't think that's a stellar opinion from Blake, but I've also never pretended like I thought she has stellar opinions, other than the fact that I think that it's good that she seems to have organized for better conditions for herself and her coworkers. Her coworkers who, I will remind you, and I'm trying to be calm, I will remind you, despite all of the bullshit in this complaint and all of these attempts to make her look like a liar, the rest of the cast is still very much on Blake's side. Nobody has doubled back. Nobody has spoken out in support of Baldoni. The cast is with Blake. Why would that happen, do you think, if she had been this huge terror nightmare who came and took over? But let's continue. We're nearing the end of this Variety write-up. The lawsuit also pushes back on a major component of Lively's California Civil Rights Division complaint, and the Times' reliance on it for its story. It's a list of 30 items that were allegedly agreed upon during a January meeting that included Baldoni, Heath, Lively, and Reynolds, and a Sony executive. But today's lawsuit claims that no such document was ever presented to Baldoni, the Wayfarer team, or to their knowledge anyone else, whether during that meeting or at any other time, and therefore could not have been agreed to. The suit adds, in reality, many of these items were encountered for the first time in the CRD complaint itself, and include references to highly disturbing events that never occurred. The repeated use of the phrase "no more" before each demand falsely suggests that these alleged incidents had previously taken place and needed to cease. This implication is not only misleading, but entirely untrue. Okay, so that would be the first and lengthier list of no mores that we went over in my first video about Blake's complaints. But there was still a huge second list of no mores that they signed and that I don't think are actually being disputed in this. Just the really long one that they didn't sign and that it never said that they signed. This just really doesn't trouble my narrative. Like, I don't care. I don't give a shit. Even the one that they all signed was bad enough, and they are banking on us forgetting that by very carefully making Blake sound like a liar. So, okay, I mentioned earlier we talk a bit more later in the article about Ryan yelling at Justin, and here's that. As for the meeting at Lively and Reynolds' penthouse apartment in Tribeca, everyone was in shock by Reynolds' outburst, the lawsuit claims. According to the lawsuit, one of the film's producers who was present said that in his 40-year career, he had never seen anyone speak to someone like that in a meeting, while the Sony representative mentioned that she would often think of that meeting, and her one regret is that she didn't stop Reynolds' berating of Baldoni. Back in August, when coverage of a mysterious feud between Lively and Baldoni began to spiral on social media and in the press, Variety inquired of Sony whether any HR complaints had been filed against Baldoni during production, and was told no. My understanding from Blake's complaint is that there was not like an official HR for her to make those complaints to. So, of course, there weren't HR complaints to leak, and also, we're kind of playing all sides of this here from Justin's team. Were they trying to leak it? Were they not trying to leak it and they didn't try to leak it and that's why they said no when Variety asked? Like, what's what am I meant to take away from this, other than that the author is very comfortable at least making money on hating women, if not hating women herself, just for fun and passion. Very close to the end of this very poorly written article, which I point out just because, like, this is the conclusion, and it does not sound like a conclusion, because it's badly written. I don't know where they found this woman. I don't know if it's that the women who are good writers didn't want to write this kind of bullshit. I don't know if it's that they just picked the first lady they went with. I don't know. It's badly written. It's not well put together. It doesn't have a thoughtful conclusion. It just kind of peters out, and then you can see the PDF version of Justin's complaints. Ultimately, the film became a breakout box office hit, earning $351 million worldwide despite a $25 million budget. The prospect of a sequel became increasingly unlikely given the bad blood between the two main players, but the drama appeared to have died down until late December, when the Times story hit. The Times reached out to the plaintiffs for an on-the-record response at 9:46 p.m. on a Friday night, just as the town's agencies and law firms had shuttered for the holiday break. The Times said it would require on-the-record responses 14 hours later. The story published roughly 2 hours earlier than that deadline. And again, I'll say I don't know much about much, so maybe somebody who knows more about journalism can let me know if this major complaint in the argument Baldoni is making holds any water, because it seems to be that the New York Times should have held off an additional 2 hours before they published their story, even though they did get a response from Baldoni's team. And I was under the impression that if you, like, are a publication and you ask for a response and you say you have until X time, if they respond early, you can publish early. But I think they're trying to imply that the New York Times should have gotten their response and then scrapped the entire article, which was obviously never going to happen if the article was far enough along for you to be asked to give a response. And again, I don't know much about much, but, like, this sounds like a strategic lawsuit against public participation, right? So I would think that an anti-slap law would, like, swipe this down pretty easily, which actually I think they're anticipating. I mean, maybe wildly they think that they're going to be able to settle, even though I think Sony has already publicly taken Blake's side. I think they know that this isn't going to go anywhere, or that he's not going to win, and that it was literally just an even easier way to put out a version of Justin Baldoni's narrative without having to worry about an interviewer maybe going off script and asking a bad question. Like I said, I read the whole complaint last night, and I would really like to break it down against Blake's complaint, see what they're saying versus what was actually said. That's just going to be a long video. I need to kind of spread out with it, so I'm not entirely sure when that's going to come out, but I wanted to give more updates. And this is the majority of the updates, is that this lawsuit has been filed, and also that, as was mentioned in this Variety article earlier, Blake's lawsuit was filed. And Justin is pretending like Blake didn't have an intention to sue. I think Blake always had an intention to sue. I think they were just waiting until the new year, and then they realized Freedman was trying to beat them to court, and they were like, fuck it, we'll just do it now. Also, it is TMZ, of all people, who has the exclusive for Blake's write-up. Which, again, if Blake's team does go to TMZ, why didn't they do that with the HR complaints this summer? Also, if anybody who knows more of what they're looking at wants to tell me, I know I have some law students or lawyers, maybe even full-on lawyers, definitely law students, though, here in the Nuance Corner. If anybody can tell me, what do you think? This is anti-slap, right? Like, this is what anti-slap is for. It's so pieces of shit like this don't successfully sue newspapers for publishing bad things about them. I'm also aware Johnny Depp was able to finesse this and get, like, his Virginia court and all that, but I don't quite see a route to that from this right now, currently. I mean, God. I mean, I know Johnny Depp's thing also should have been anti-slap, and it wasn't, because we live in hell, so who knows where this could possibly go. But my gut is telling me that this one from Justin is probably not going to go anywhere. Maybe a later one if he, like, directly tries to sue Blake for defamation, God forbid. My big fear is that she somehow ends up being a defamation defendant in all of this, but I'm trying to remind myself that she has a very different legal team and level of, like, public celebrity support than Amber Heard did. So let's go ahead and move into the Blake of it all. I'm not going to read the whole TMZ article because I'm pretty sure I can make this video under an hour long for a change, and also because the article is TMZ. I get much less joy in dunking on a TMZ article not being well written than I do in like an entertainment article like something from Variety. And also, we already know most of this, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's from Blake's team, it is an exclusive, and this same statement was also included in the Variety article, but I saved it until just now. When my light died, apparently. In a statement to TMZ, attorneys for Blake Lively said, earlier today, Ms. Lively filed a federal complaint against Wayfarer Studios and others in the Southern District of New York. Ms. Lively previously sent her California Civil Rights Department complaint in response to the retaliatory campaign Wayfarer launched against her for reporting sexual harassment and workplace safety concerns. Unfortunately, Ms. Lively's decision to speak out has resulted in further retaliation and attacks. As alleged in Ms. Lively's federal complaint, Wayfarer and its associates have violated federal and California state law by retaliating against her for reporting sexual harassment and workplace safety concerns. Now, the defendants will answer for their conduct in federal court. Ms. Lively has brought this litigation in New York, where much of the relevant activities described in the complaint took place, but we reserve the right to pursue further action in other venues and jurisdictions as appropriate under the law. So, okay, that's where it currently stands. We're pushing through my filming light dying. The cast of the movie still seems to support Blake, though texts from Justin's complaint show that, as we pretty much could have expected, the original editors were not super stoked about her taking over editing after the fact, but like that's pretty guessed already, right? Justin and his team definitely seem to be hoping to lean into people being angry at Blake for things like taking over creative control of the movie and other things that we already know that they saw that the internet ran with. A lot of these complaints are about, for example, how Blake handled doing the wardrobe for her character in the movie, something that we know people on the internet were already complaining about before the movie even came out. It feels far more like it is just designed to stoke a bit more perpetual internet outrage at this woman than it is to actually disprove anything the New York Times was saying in that article. Also, like, the article for the New York Times was reporting based on Blake's complaint, and they reported what was in Blake's complaint, and Blake's complaint had those texts like that. So, like, it would come down to how Blake's lawyers presented that in the complaint, which was being reported on. Again, this just feels like slap to me. So, to wrap up here, I want to recap the current state of lawsuits. Baldoni first got sued by Steph Jones of Jones Works, his former PR representation. Then Baldoni, via Brian Freedman, who we discussed is a piece of shit, filed against the New York Times, and Lively filed against Baldoni and Wayfarer, citing mental pain and anguish, severe emotional distress, and lost wages. At some point in the next week or two, we will take a closer look at Baldoni's filing, and especially why the screenshots provided inside of it don't work for me. And I'm going to link Justin's complaint and both of the articles I read from today in the description below if you're interested in reading them yourself. I'd love to hear what you think about all of it. Personally, like you can already tell, it didn't change anything for me. If anything, the amount of shit that Baldoni and his lawyer seemed to tell on themselves for, like that they think that Justin being invited in once contradicts that he ever could have not been invited in the future, it just makes it all look a lot worse. And it made me feel genuinely insulted for the sake of my intelligence to be asked to pretend like this didn't all just make Baldoni and company look worse. And I'm being asked to do that all for the sake of this man's feelings, which are so present and centered all throughout this complaint, despite a refusal on the part of many to even remotely consider what all of this might have felt like for Blake, including leading up to and informing her decision to take over the creative control of the work and make her own edit. You know, maybe to make sure that a sequel couldn't be made without her having a real claim to being the one to direct it. My hope is that there is never another It Ends With Us movie, and also that they don't make any more Colleen Hoover books in the future into movies either. But, like, I don't blame her for trying to take back whatever level of autonomy she could over the movie that was going to be made out of her on film being sexually harassed. I don't care that Blake Lively took over Baldoni's stupid movie. A movie that he gets pissy, by the way. I know I said I'm not really going into the complaint, and I'm not, but I have to tell you about this. A movie that he gets pissy about, and he says is an opportunity that he gave to Colleen Hoover. Justin Baldoni, in his filing, his lawyer is, like, pissed and saying how it's such an injustice that Colleen Hoover sided with Blake Lively over Justin Baldoni and says that this whole thing, the movie and stuff, is an opportunity that Justin Baldoni gave to Colleen Hoover. Do you know what a fucked up little misogynist you have to be to make me feel defensive of Colleen Hoover? Are you fucking joking? Buddy, Colleen Hoover gave you the opportunity when you read her book about domestic violence and you thought it was sexy and then you wanted to make a movie out of it. Don't fucking play games with me. Like, oh my god. The opportunity he gave to her. I think that's part of what's so fascinating about all of this to me, is that Justin Baldoni is a man who desperately and eagerly and deeply needs to be humbled, and it's starting to seem like that might happen for him. I do have a feeling that news about this is going to slow down unless Baldoni files directly against Blake. I do expect more people in Hollywood and otherwise to support Blake. I feel like I'm going to be very let down by Taylor Swift if she doesn't put out a statement at some point about this, but I will be very surprised if Taylor Swift doesn't put out a statement at some point about all of this, because while there are many causes that you can't reliably expect Taylor Swift to throw her hat in for, misogyny against a wealthy white woman is pretty firmly within her wheelhouse. That's one of her pet causes. So I am hoping that she will do some kind of mob walk with Blake Lively, like she did with Sophie Turner during that whole mess. I'm gonna work on something else before I come back for Justin's complaint. I started doing a deep dive on this sex education YouTuber named Lacey Green and her eventual red pill arc, and I zoned out and then zoned back in with a 20-page script, which I really thought was going to be the next thing I started working on before Baldoni decided to file this lawsuit. So maybe consider subscribing to my channel if you want to make sure that you don't miss either the upcoming Lacey Green deep dive or my upcoming videos about this whole mess, because I will continue to keep an eye on it. I really appreciate how many of you have told me that you trust me and the eye that I'm keeping on it. I like doing this. I don't like that this happened to someone, but it's interesting to talk about. I enjoy talking about it. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you especially to my Patreon subscribers, a few of whose names you can see on the screen right now. Patreon's a great way to help support me financially, and you get a couple extra videos from me every month. And you get a couple extra videos from me every month. If you're interested in helping to support me financially, but you don't need extra videos from me every month and you don't want to sign up for a recurring thing, I also have a tip jar on Ko-fi, which is a huge help. Thank you so much to everybody who has helped me, either through the Patreon, through the Ko-fi, or even in other fashions, like by watching my videos all the way through to the end, liking them, subscribing to my channel, suggesting my videos to other people. All of it helps a lot. Thank you for watching. Oh, and I was going to say this earlier and then I totally forgot, but I watched Kaylasays video about the Anora intimacy coordinator debate, and I think that's a really helpful conversation for this conversation too. I'm going to link that in the description as well. You should definitely watch it if you haven't yet. I will talk more about how I feel about the intimacy coordinator thing when we go over the complaint, but suffice it to say, my opinions are very much in line with Kayla's on that. And also, Kayla is, I think, the only other creator I've seen talk about the Brian Jordan Alvarez allegations. So yeah, check out Kayla's videos if you haven't already. I have that linked in the description below. Also, thank you so much to Coffee and Colts for shouting me out in her recent video. That was really, really cool. And somebody got Hassan Piker to say my channel name by saying that I had a video about all of this. And then that ended up in re-upload videos later. That's so cool. Thank you so much. I'll be here again very soon. We're going to be talking a lot about, all of this if there's updates, and also early 2013's YouTube in the coming weeks. So yeah, maybe subscribe if that sounds like a good time to you. It sounds like a good time to me. That's why I'm doing it. I love you very much. I will be back again to talk about something else very soon.